It was actually, I was inspired to do this session a few years ago. As a member of PMI's New York City chapter, I had attended quite a few Leadership Institute meetings, and this is about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I put together a program that was associated with obtaining volunteer leaders and retaining your volunteers and so on. So I did a bunch of research and put it all together and came up with this slide program, which if you are interested for your chapters, I will make sure that you get a copy of it. All you have to do is send me an email, and I'll provide you with that information a little bit later on. But our topic, strategies for recruiting, obtaining, and retaining volunteer leaders. My name is Frank Saladis. I've been around PMI for a long time. I was president of New York City chapter from 1991 to 2001, and again president in 2005. And I'm actually president-elect for 2015. And I thought it would be a good idea to refresh my memory on recruiting volunteers, bringing people in, and so on. And then I thought, well, the Leadership Institute meeting is coming up pretty quickly, and what a great way to maybe get some connections going even before the Leadership Institute meeting, which will be held in Phoenix this year, just before the Congress. And hopefully some of you will be attending that session. And so with that, the agenda for this webinar is basically very straightforward. Quick introduction about what this is about, and then get into some of the things about the challenges of running a chapter, managing a chapter, leading a chapter, especially in the area of trying to get good quality volunteers that are going to make a commitment and then keep that commitment. We'll talk a little bit about the techniques and strategies for recruiting and retaining leaders and volunteers, some suggestions on developing a plan, some tips for success, and then we'll talk about next steps moving forward. So one of the things that was brought out during the last webinar that we did, I had mentioned this but decided to include it, was that PMI actually puts out several documents and lots of information that will help volunteer leaders. And what I was reviewing several times and still reviewing all the information that's in there are the PMI Chapter Leaders Guides. One of them is Strategies for Onboarding and Transitioning, and the other one is Volunteer Role Delineation Study Results First Edition. And there's just a huge amount of information in here. And what I just wanted to point out would be that things that you as a chapter officer or a volunteer in a leadership position should be doing would be reviewing the chapter bylaws with your new volunteers, that there are actually a number of PMI developed virtual seminars that the new leaders and volunteers can visit and learn a lot about PMI and how to run the chapter and how to lead groups and things like that. You can set up a conference call with the PMI chapter partner administrator. Judy Brennan is one of the key players in PMI's Global Operations Center, and they also have something called PMI Global 101. This is just a few of the items that are found in these leaders guides. So it would be very, very beneficial for you as a chapter leader to actually obtain some of these copies. And I'm pretty sure that you just call up someone at PMI, send them an email, and you can get quite a few copies that you can distribute to your leadership team. So it's actually a very useful thing and something that will help you even plan out your strategies for working with newly appointed volunteers. So the purpose of the webinar, again, is really to help chapters, whether you're a seasoned chapter leader or a new chapter leader or someone that's just getting involved. Now, this is something we have to do all the time, okay? And we have to think differently because in today's age, with all the busyness that's going on and all the jobs that people have and the demands of their customers and their places of employment, that it is really a bit of a challenge. So what we really want to do is always look to enhance the programs that will engage members and attract new leaders. And I think that I've been at close to 70 PMI chapters around the world in my time with PMI. Most recently, I was in Romania, in Bucharest, for their professional development day. And it really is, no matter where you go, one of the topics of discussion happens to be getting volunteers, maintaining those volunteers, some of the challenges associated with when a volunteer doesn't actually meet commitments, things like that. And it seems to be everywhere. So what we have to do is we have to continuously look for new ways to bring in the right kinds of volunteers that are willing to follow through on that commitment, and also to get some enjoyment out of it too. We all know, I'm pretty sure that you know, that any leadership teams that display a high sense of enthusiasm and commitment, and they stay connected with the membership, will always attract qualified volunteers. People are going to say, you know what, I want to get in on this. This seems great. They seem to be having a great time. They're enjoying themselves. They're learning some things. So why not join? And that's what I think is important. So you have to have that right attitude and display your commitment. Now, maybe some of you may not agree with this, but generally, recruiting is not as difficult as we make it out to be. There are people in every type of business and every type of nonprofit organization that are out there waiting for an opportunity to contribute. Many times, they just simply need to be asked. And what we need to do is we need to be somewhat aggressive in going out there and asking people. But they are out there. If you have an attitude that says, I can't imagine that someone would volunteer for this, well, that attitude will pretty much be visible, and people won't volunteer. So the idea is you volunteered, you had a reason for it, you were enthusiastic about it, and what you want to do is you're kind of like an ambassador for your chapter to get new people to come in. So your attitude is critical, and you have to maintain that enthusiasm. This positive attitude, along with setting a very, very clear set of expectations, will help people understand what they're getting into, what's involved in being a volunteer, and they're likely to join up. So this attitude, the positive thinking, and setting clear expectations are definitely key elements of getting your volunteers. Now, another thing is about making a connection. If you really think about it, and I think all of you that are volunteers, I'm thinking that many of you that are on this call are volunteering and you're dealing with this, is that it's a time issue. And if you do not see value from being involved in something, then you're not going to get involved. Okay? And what we have to do is we have to ensure this value that's associated with being involved, because when you say yes to PMI type of work or volunteer work in your organization, you actually have to say no to something else, which might be family, friends, work, and other things. So starting with value, understanding that people are going to have to make a commitment, they're going to want to get something out of it. It's pretty much basic human nature for people to think in terms of WIIFM, which means what's in it for me. And, you know, when you talk to volunteers, a lot of people say, well, you know, I'm not getting anything out of this at all. I mean, I'm not being paid for it. I just want to do it. But if you ask people why they are doing their volunteer work, most of them is because they're getting some self-satisfaction out of it. It's making them feel good. They feel like they can contribute, and all these things. These are things that are what we're seeing our personal selves. Okay, so what we want to do here is continue to feed that WIIFM by giving people this feeling of self-worth, that they're doing something that's helping other people, and that we're creating this perceived high value for your members. So the key point on this would be that today's members need relevant value spelled out specifically for them. You know, I'm going to do this. How is it going to add value? Because I want to feel good about it. Now, another important thing about volunteering is don't make it look like some kind of a backup plan. If you are overheard or showing some kind of an attitude or something that kind of relates to this, maybe we can get a volunteer to do that since nobody else will. Let's be really careful about that. People are looking to do valuable work, making a contribution, and if we are looking at the volunteer work as being very menial, small tasks or anything like that, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to get anybody to line up to help. So let's make sure that we're very careful about how we describe the work that's being done, and that any work that's being done from a volunteer that's going to help your chapter is going to be very, very useful and something that people should be proud to be doing. So the challenge, you're the leader. The challenge is having meaningful work ready for people to do once they have volunteered. I know several organizations that are always, we need volunteers, we need volunteers. People send in saying, hey, I'd like to volunteer, and then they don't hear anything from anybody for a lot of different reasons, but the bottom line is that we ask for volunteers and we don't give them something to do, they're going to lose interest quickly. So let's make sure that we define this work very clearly and that it's meaningful. Otherwise, we're going to get this revolving door. People come in, they get disillusioned, and then they leave. And the question then becomes, why do people become disillusioned? So I'd like to make this webinar a little bit interactive. So anybody have any comments about, from your experience, what creates this issue of being disillusioned? Why do people become disillusioned? Anybody want to share? What you can do is just post an information in the questions box, okay? And I'll read it off, and then if you have a comment, then I can certainly hand the microphone off to you. So anybody have any comments, observations about why people become disillusioned as volunteers? Okay, and Karen says they don't understand what is expected of them, which is definitely clear. That's a problem that we need to fix. Okay, we're asking for volunteers and we don't tell them what our expectations are. Now, the one thing I can tell you, this is my own personal experience, is that people in general, and a lot of managers, or just don't do a good job of setting expectations. We have to set them intentionally. We have to sit down with people and say, these are the things that I expect of you, and also it is a two-way street. If you are giving your set of expectations, then it's also important for them to provide expectations of you, okay? Some people say they don't feel like they're making a difference or included with the group. And this is a problem. We need to make them feel like they belong. I'm getting some feedback from some volunteers saying that, I don't really hear much from anyone. We're not as transparent as we should be, and things like that. So let's make sure that we are getting these volunteers to stay connected, to be connected. Volunteers, let's see. Gaps between events lead to loss of interest. By the next event, volunteers are no longer volunteering. That is true. We need continuity. We absolutely, positively need continuity. So let's try to stop this revolving door by being very, very straightforward, upfront, and clear about our expectations, and making those volunteers feel that they are important and that they're doing something valuable. Now, if we have a retention issue, okay, if we're just not holding on to volunteers, the general recommendation is to stop recruiting until you have analyzed why there is a retention problem. So let's not keep bringing people on if they're just simply going to leave. Let's stop and start asking ourselves, okay, why do we have this problem? Why are we seeing people leave? Why are we not getting new people in? We try to get new volunteers and then they leave. Let's take a look at what is going on to cause these problems. So I think we can all agree that, most of you, I believe, are PMI chapter officers, that this is an ongoing problem. It's not just in one chapter, it's in many chapters. There are chapters, I can say, that are extremely vibrant. They follow process. They recognize their volunteers. They have a very good, strong succession plan. They have programs that are interesting and exciting and bring in new people. So we have, lots of chapters that are doing the right kinds of things, and maybe we should be talking to some of those chapters and getting information from them about how they're being successful. So let's talk a little bit about some strategies for success. Okay, you as the leaders of your chapters have three major mandates. Okay, and I think that you're probably familiar with these, but identify the needs of the organization stakeholders, the members, clients, volunteers, whoever those stakeholders are, including your PM community. Okay, so let's make sure that we understand who they are. Secondly, that we have to mobilize volunteers to meet the needs of the stakeholders. Without volunteers, I don't know how any chapter could actually survive. We need volunteer leaders. We need people to organize events. We need people to handle things like governance and bylaws and things like that. We need all these volunteers. So we have to mobilize them. And then, of course, we have to motivate and inspire them, helping volunteers to energize themselves through effective and authentic leadership. And I always emphasize authentic leadership. What that basically means is that you are doing something that is perceived by your organization and people outside of your organization as adding value. That's what authentic leadership is. You are actually making a difference. How do we do that? Well, it's your attitude. You have to motivate, you have to inspire by your own personal behavior. Okay? Strategies for success also include making sure that this experience as a volunteer is a great experience. Okay? That's really the ultimate strategy. All right? If your volunteers are walking away saying, what a great experience, what better form of advertising is than that, really? Okay? Your volunteers should be walking away saying, wow, this was great. I had a great time, and I'm going to help maybe somebody else volunteer to take my place, but it's all about that experience. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the SWOT analysis, conducting a SWOT analysis to determine your component priorities, your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'm sure that every chapter, even ones that might be struggling a little bit, certainly have some strengths, and they do have certain opportunities. What we really need to do is we need to understand that bigger picture that will create the strategy that we're going to follow, and then that will also lead us towards the kinds of volunteers that we need. If we're not organized, if you don't have a strategic plan, if you don't have direction, if you don't start to look into the future and clearly understand your vision and mission, it's going to be extremely difficult to get those volunteers. So we will start with something like a strategic analysis or SWOT analysis. Review the vision and mission and create a wish list. You know, where do you want to be? What do you want to do? Okay. I think that every leader, every volunteer in the chapter should understand what the vision and mission of the chapter is, and then they should have the opportunity to contribute suggestions about direction, moving forward, new ideas, and things like that. Another part of the strategy here is the goal is to align volunteers where they might best contribute their specific talents. What you have here are people who are very good at things. There might be someone that's very good in technology. Someone might be a very good event planner. Someone might be very good at writing, and you need articles for your newsletter. Someone might be very good at coordinating and editing a newsletter. What we want to do is find out what their specific talents are. There are people who are very good at finance and can keep track of the costs of the chapter. There are people who are associated with marketing and things like that. So let's get to focus on their specific talents. Okay, design and develop volunteer assignments that are valuable to the organization. I think the key here, and I highlighted it, is connect the assignments to feelings of self-worth. We want the volunteers to actually feel good about the time that they're spending because it's their time. Okay, they're not getting paid for it. They are being taken away from other things. They need to feel really good when they've completed their assignment, or they should feel good while they're doing it. A critical factor. Okay, and I think that of all the different slides that are in this particular program, this one is probably one of the most important ones. The experiences of your current volunteers will determine the level of difficulty in obtaining new volunteers. And I think that many of you can relate to that. It's your experience, the experience that you have, will determine whether or not you want to sign up for something in the next year. We need to find a way to make sure that experience is something that they can talk to other people about. Because what better person is there to recruit new volunteers than a volunteer that's had a great experience? And if they haven't had a great experience, I am sure they'll tell other people about it, which will make our jobs much, much more difficult. So, strategies. Before you ask for volunteers, make sure you know why you need them, know what you want them to do. So we need job descriptions. We need detailed information so that we're not guessing. We have to be very specific. We have to be factual. We have to be very, very straightforward and not not ambiguous in terms of explaining what we need them to do. So let's articulate that need. Give them detail. I think they all want some detail. And when I mean detail, I mean, well, what exactly does this job mean? What am I expected to do? How long will I have to work on it? How many hours or days in a month am I going to be doing this? Who will I be working with? What kind of tools will I have? We need to provide them with a lot of detail. It's really important. Okay? Here's a good example. Volunteers diversify and expand the programs and services we can offer our stakeholders. And this is something you would say to a volunteer. You have a talent for. You have a talent for organizing. You have a talent for solving problems. You have a talent for balancing the budget, whatever it is. We could really use you, and here's why. And then you get into some detail. So you want to make sure that you open these discussions with this focus on their talent. Okay? Other strategies. Make sure that we are able to describe the position in detail. What are the necessary skills? If you think about it, you as a leader need the skills of dealing with people, problem solving, conflict management, influencing people. There are people who have technology skills. We have, as I said before, event planning skills. We absolutely positively need people managing documentation, our processes, and of course finances. We have to tell people about the time requirements, hours, days, and you'll see it says right there, don't hold back here. Tell it like it is. Don't make people become surprised that, wow, this is a lot more work than I thought. Let's make sure that they know up front what it is they're getting themselves into. And then duration. Is this a year long? Is it 2 years? Is it 6 months? Is it a one-time event? Okay, let's be clear about all of these things that we're going to need our volunteers to do. Okay, other things, details of all responsibilities. Okay, if you become a chapter leader, traveling to the Leadership Institute meeting, for instance, traveling to a region meeting, meeting with your regional mentors, things like that. Some chapters have actually formed small coalitions where they meet in small groups. So are there travel conditions? What about on-call situations? If you're the president, if you're the finance director or VP of finance, there's a good chance that people will be calling you fairly often about issues. Okay, so we have to have this idea of how much on-call time. Meeting attendance. There's board meetings, there's chapter meetings, there are programs and events, there are workshops, there are multiple things, strategy sessions. People need to be aware of just how much time is going to be involved in doing these things. And what we have to stress, which I don't think we stress enough, is that you have to have a backup. If you're a volunteer, do you have a backup? Who's going to support you if something happens to you, if you become disabled or you have a major job assignment that takes you out of the loop for a while? Where's your backup? And as it says in both of these books, the Chapter Leaders Guide, the transitioning and onboarding, and also the role delineation study, that succession planning is part of every officer's job description. So we really need to immediately start thinking about our backup as we get started. It's basic risk management. What are the deliverables that are associated with the position? Okay, now we have strategic deliverables such as your strategic plan and guiding the chapter forward to meet that vision. And we also have tactical and operations deliverables. And those would be things like the chapter meetings, the chapter workshops and programs, the revenue generating events and things like that. Organizing and getting information out to our membership through communications and newsletters and things like that. So we really have to look at the specifics of the position and whether that position is a strategic position on the board or if it's a more tactical position where they're actually physically getting work done and producing the deliverables that sustain the chapter. So what we need then is a recruitment plan or a plan for retention. And there are several steps here, and they're very specific. And what we really want to do is we want to focus on doing these kinds of things. We need well-defined job descriptions. We need to be out there advertising the need for volunteers, but also giving them some information up front about what it is we need them to do. Where are you going to get the volunteers from? Okay, chapter meetings. Some people are regular attendees at chapter meetings. You have networking events and chapter programs. You also have other professional organizations that attract people, and you might want to send some of your chapter representatives to some of these other professional organizations. Pass out some business cards and say, hey, we've got these programs going on you might be interested in. So look at multiple sources to get volunteers. How are you going to communicate your message? One of the things that I ask in a lot of classes is, it's a simple question, how many of you are excellent communicators? Okay, are we doing a good job of communicating the information to our potential volunteers? Are we setting the right stage and the right example? Are we saying the right things? Are we using the right tone? We have to make sure that we communicate this message in such a way that people are going to pay attention to it and actually listen. Another thing that I think most of you probably have experienced would be is that many chapters, because of their need for volunteers, are looking for people who basically have a pulse. You know, they're breathing, and therefore, great, we're going to make them a volunteer. Well, that's something that we really don't want to do. We need people who are going to make a commitment, that have self-esteem, that understand what integrity is, that know how to fulfill a commitment, that they have a desire to make a contribution, that they were kind of setting their sights kind of high here. So we need a screening process. If people are getting on board and they really can't do it because of work and family issues, well then we really, you know, could say thank you, but you know, this isn't for you at this time. Let's make sure that we're very fair about that. Good interviews, good screening process, and assigning of work to meet the talents of the individual. We definitely have to have a feedback process, and we need to have some way of measuring the success. It's just like it's, you know, what someone told me a long time ago, that once you have volunteered your time, you're no longer a volunteer. You have made a commitment to do work. So we do need to provide feedback when someone is not doing what they committed to, or if they need some assistance, we need to find that out. And also we need to have some way to follow through on our metrics. How far did we get? Do we have clearly defined objectives? It's all part of this process. One of the things that you'll find that volunteers need, even though they say I'm doing this because I want to, is recognition. There should be perks, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but we need a strategy that is going to sincerely thank the volunteers for their time. Remember, they're putting in an awful lot of time. I know some volunteers that have been volunteering for years and years and years, and they're giving me their feedback saying, well, you know, don't seem to get that much appreciation. That should be your #1 priority. Recognize your volunteers and thank them frequently for the work that they do. Once you have a plan, of course, you have to execute your plan, and during the process, just like we do with our projects, document your lessons learned from those volunteer experiences. These are really important things to think about. So when you're thinking about volunteers, you want to definitely enlist the best, and I like this. It says, look for people who burn to be involved. Okay, you know, they're out there. They're seeing some of the potential. They're seeing how people can make contributions. Those of you that attend your chapter meetings and you have the volunteers that are handling everything from registration to finding new speakers, you know what? Most of them really enjoy doing it. They enjoy being part of it, and they smile a lot. You want more people like that. So find people that are out there that really, oh, I can't wait to volunteer. I'm really interested. I want to make a contribution. Now, they might burn, but keep in mind that we have to take a look at their background. We've got to look at their experience. We have to look at their talents. We have to make sure that they can actually handle the job that they're possibly interested in, and make sure that we are clear about our expectations. Set up an appointment, meet with them, have a complete set of questions ready to ask, including finding out what's motivating the candidate. You know, why are you interested in volunteering? Get some information from them. Make sure that you're providing a big picture about the chapter. This is what the chapter does. Here's our vision. Here's our mission. Here are the programs. Here's why we need the volunteers, why it's important. And again, and I've said this a few times, clearly define your expectations. Okay? The basic rules and expectations are that expectations should be intentionally set. They should be reviewed often, and we have to make sure we understand that everything that we do or don't do or say or don't say will set an expectation. So if you're the leader of a chapter or leader of a group, you decide that it's okay for you to come 15, 20 minutes late to a meeting, you're setting an expectation amongst everybody that it's okay to be late. If you don't follow through on documentation when you say that you're going to do, then people will say, well, okay, he's not taking that very seriously either. I guess I don't have to worry about that. So let's make sure that whatever we do, whatever expectations we have, we clearly set them, and then we follow through with our own behavior. Other strategies. Explain the benefits. Those people who volunteer should be clearly given the benefits of being a volunteer. You are going to get new skills. If you have never been involved in a strategic planning session, and you are part of an organized strategic session with a representative from PMI, where you come in and you spend a day, you're going to gain some excellent new skills and really get some insight in what it takes to really plan for an organization's future. Okay? You will also get the benefit of more networking, increased social connections, attending the Leadership Institute meetings and the professional development days and special events that are volunteer-only events. You want to make them special. Make them feel special. You'll be sharing a lot of knowledge. There are people that are in your chapters that have quite a bit of knowledge and are extremely experienced in various areas, and they'll be able to share it. They'll be able to get some mentoring and coaching, and eventually they'll be able to mentor and coach someone else. They will get PDUs, professional development units, and there's no question that being a chapter officer or being involved in chapter events is a nice addition to a resume. There is no question about it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to ask you a question and maybe get some comments here, but those of you that are on the call here, why did you volunteer? What was some of the benefits associated with being a volunteer? Can you share a few of those items? I see that we have someone from the Northeast Florida chapter. Okay, so why did you volunteer? Improved networking was one. Okay, that's from our Northeast Florida chapter. What else? Any other reasons why you volunteer? There's got to be a couple of reasons. Networking is certainly generally number one on the list, but what about, new skills, leadership skills, conflict resolution, problem solving, collaboration? Anybody have anything to share? Incoming president asked for help. I thought, why not? Hey, there you go. That's what I'm looking for. The incoming president asked me, I said, I need help, and said, why not? That's excellent. Thank you, Dana. Okay. Seriously, because one of the officers approached me and asked, give back to the chapter. Excellent. Mimi, thank you very much. Get to know what is really going on. Outstanding, outstanding. Love spending my time with professionals. Wow, okay. I'm going to take that as a compliment. Okay, that's great. Okay, let's see what this is. Unemployed and poof, they disappear after they become employed. Oh, that's definitely a challenge. Understandable, of course, but frustrating as hell for those of us left holding the bag. That's why we're talking here today. We don't really want to be holding the bag. We need to get people who are going to follow through on their commitment. And that is careful. That is really something we have to be very careful about. We got to get people who are going to follow through on their word. This is an ethics kind of a thing, personal integrity. Dan says opportunity for personal growth, be engaged with the chapter. Tom. Okay, so one of the reasons I volunteered was I really wanted to meet more people. I wanted to know the inner workings of PMI. I attribute my experiences and the ability to travel and do all these different things in large part to being part of PMI. There's just so many opportunities that are out there. Mimi says a sense of pride after successful events. Really, wow, excellent. Okay, so it's personal growth, feeling a sense of pride, and you know how we get that? We get that through this collaboration, working with other people, talking to people, and that transparency that I had mentioned before. We really do have to make a better connection with our volunteers, no question about it. Okay, so we talked about expectations. Let's just be real specific here. Okay, what is the exact work assignment that you're going to be given? And I think that my experience tells me that a lot of people don't have all the details that they need. What's the time required in hours or days per week? When and where will the assignment be carried out? I mean, is it something virtual? Is it something that's specific to a location? Is it a 1-year time frame, 2 years? Who are we going to be working with? Is the team in place, or do I have to go create a team? Does that mean that I volunteered, which means that now I have to go recruit more volunteers? And who's going to support and coach me? All right? Do we need any of that coaching and mentoring? These are important things that we have to ask and we have to be able to talk about so that people are clear about what they're getting themselves involved in. What training or orientation is required? Okay, this idea of the I've got a pulse, I can breathe, and I am a warm body, we got to go way beyond that. What kind of training should we be giving our new volunteers? Okay, if you look at these chapter leaders guides, there is material. There's not only self-study material, there are virtual training sessions available to volunteers so that they can learn more about PMI and being a volunteer leader, and so on. Okay, let's make sure that they clearly understand what is expected of them in terms of deliverables, the tangible items associated with their position. What about the benefits to themselves in the chapter? The tangible benefits might be reduced cost, increased revenue. The intangible cost would be, you know, goodwill in the community, things like that. So let's make sure that we understand what they're going to get out of it from a chapter perspective, but also from an individual perspective. Now, this is something we probably don't spend enough time on, and that's risks and liabilities. Keep in mind that we bring on volunteers if they are not qualified, if they have certain issues that can create problems for the chapter. It could result in some kind of litigation. So let's make sure that we really ask a lot of good questions up front to make sure that we're bringing on the right people. Most of us have experienced some unpleasant situation that involved a person in the chapter or something like that. It does happen occasionally, and we have to look back at our lessons learned and use that to help prevent having a repeat occurrence. And these are the kinds of things that chapter officers, when they're planning their succession, need to pass on to whoever their successor will be. We've had a few experiences, and let me tell you about them, okay, and give them their background information and what to look for and what you learned and things that you should avoid, things like that. It's very important. Make sure that you have the appropriate insurance for your chapter, and something that we sometimes forget is to make sure that we're following the bylaws. And your volunteers need to be aware of the bylaws. So there are lots of risks and liabilities that need to be addressed. Just like a project, we have to make sure that we understand what they are, identify them up front, and find ways to develop our mitigation strategies and our contingencies for these kinds of things. Here is an example of a volunteer job description. Now this is high level, but it will give you something to work with. What's the name of the position? And I have to tell you, this is very, very important. People relate to their position titles. So give them titles that sound impressive if you can, okay? Event leader, event planner, something like that. Maybe you can make that a little bit more interesting. So use your imagination to come up with titles that people could say, I'm proud to be this. Make sure that you're clear about the purpose of the assignment. Detailed list of responsibilities. These are the things that you're responsible for. This is what we're attempting to accomplish, the objectives and the desired outcomes. This is the kind of training that we will provide to you, or what is available to you through PMI. Here's the reporting structure. You're a direct report to this particular individual. The time commitment, for the most part, I think you'll find that most volunteer assignments are a few hours a week. I think if you're president, or if you're, especially if you're a VP of finance or something like that, I think you're going to find that there's a little bit more time involved. If you're the program manager, if you're developing educational programs, it could actually be a little bit more time. But we want to be fair about that and tell people what's involved. And that's why we need volunteers to kind of spread out that work. What are the benefits associated with volunteering? What will they get in exchange for volunteering? Besides the PDUs, there is prestige. There is the sincere acknowledgement, and you know, at the end of every year, many chapters actually take their volunteers out to dinner. They give them some type of an award. They make them feel that they did a great job and that they're getting a sincere thank you. As we look into getting the volunteers, we have to understand that there are categories of volunteers. There are those who are currently volunteering, and those need to have special attention. We want to make sure that they're getting the support that they need, that they're occasionally being contacted just to find out what's going on, maybe some informal discussion, but make them feel that, yeah, I'm still belong here. There are those who are interested in volunteering but are not actively engaged, and you can find a lot of those at your chapter meetings and your events. And you know, actively go out there and pass out business cards and say, hey, you know, you might be interested in doing this, or the chapter could really use your talent in this area. So get out there. There are some people who have no understanding of what volunteering is. At some point in time, you might want to have some kind of a volunteer orientation session or information session to tell people the kinds of opportunities that are out there to volunteer for. There are people who will never volunteer. I think you'll be able to find out who they are very quickly, and you're not going to spend any time with them. There are people, and let's be honest, that you really don't want as volunteers. Okay, and this is going to come out through your screening processes and things like that. But let's be fair and let's be honest that sometimes we have picked up a volunteer or two that we sure wish things could be different. And then there are those who aspire to lead. Some people are just interested in volunteering because it makes them feel good, but others are actually interested in going into the officer positions, the board positions, to be the president of the chapter, and then go on to other things. So this is a great opportunity for people who aspire to lead. So let's make sure we look at the big, broad range of categories of volunteers. Other things that we can do. Increase the visibility of your chapter. The more value-adding programs we offer, the greater visibility that we have. Outreach programs, affiliations with other professional organizations, a better or stronger public relations type of a program where we're getting out there into the school systems and the universities and things like that. We want to make sure that we have that positive image all the time. And think about, you know, who do you touch in the course of a year from a professional perspective? Pass on some business cards and say, hey, why don't you come to a meeting? You know, we can really use people that have your ability. Okay? Create network opportunities with your community boards, your civic organizations, and actively brainstorm. Maybe at the beginning of your chapter meetings, brainstorm for ideas. Hey, what can we do as a chapter to help us reach out to the millions of project managers that are out there that might be interested in becoming part of the organization? Some of the techniques for recruiting, you know, to tell you the truth, some chapters are using TV and radio. Certainly, they're all using the internet. We got you know, websites for just about everybody. We got newsletters and newspapers. Well, get out there, do a little bit more. You know, use your imagination. Information videos posted on YouTube, posted on your chapter website. Slide presentations. I just did one recently. Talked about the value of PMI to the Federal Reserve in New York City. Okay, send mail out, create events, volunteers, posters, brochures. The key here is, it says in big red letters, don't assume that everyone knows your chapter is there. You know, the New York City chapter has like 2,700 members now. It fluctuates up and down a little bit, but you know, I'm teaching a class in Manhattan this week, and there are several people and they've never heard of PMI. So it's the same everywhere. If you think about PMI as an organization, we have just under 500,000 members worldwide. but our statistics that we derive from things like PMI's Pulse of the Profession and the PwC State of Project Management indicate that there are something like 51 million project managers or people working on projects out there around the world. So when you think of 500,000 compared to 51 million, we have a long way to go. So let's get out there. Let's get more information going and show people how you can make a contribution not only to project management but to your communities and to other people. These last pieces, last couple of slides here, focus on volunteer leadership. If you have a newly appointed leader, again, communicate the expectations up front and don't let them flounder. It's not a sink or swim kind of a thing. Give them a lot of support. Make sure that the volunteer can commit to the time required. Start them slowly. Don't inundate them with a tremendous amount of things at one time. Seek support. Encourage the volunteer to get some support, like a mentor, and encourage mentoring or become a mentor yourself. And make sure that you're constantly providing guidance about the bylaws and procedures in the chapter. This is something that I think is very important to all chapters, bylaws and procedures. The seasoned leader, if you can, become a mentor. Okay, even after your term is completed, you could become a trustee or an advisor to the board and become a mentor. You know, people will really learn a lot from your experience. Keep that enthusiasm high. Communicate to your volunteers as often as possible. Get out there. I don't mean inundate people with emails all the time, but get out there and talk to them. Maybe even leave them a voicemail once in a while. Okay, make sure that you are available so that you can respond to their needs, and you're always setting an example. These are the kinds of things that the leaders should be doing. Okay, make sure that each leader understands what's expected of them and also what each individual volunteer is expected to do. Provide the opportunity for the team to actually do the work. So don't be over-supervising them and giving them lots and lots of maybe too much mentoring. Give them an opportunity to do some things and report back to you. Okay? So a little autonomy is a good thing. If there's any way that you can offer them some kind of training, formal training, informal training, maybe your chapters have some programs that allow that for leaders, definitely get them involved. That is a perk. And if you can engage people like maybe strategic planners, bring them in so that we can learn from their expertise. So engage those experts whenever possible. Set priorities. There are some things that are urgent and important. There are some things that are not important that people make urgent. There are some things that are, basically important but not urgent. And we want to make sure that we establish those priorities. What is most important for the chapter? What are we doing or need to do to make sure that we're making a commitment, not a commitment, but a contribution to our chapter, to the community, to the people that we support? One thing that's really important is to balance your workload with your volunteer life, your family life, and so on. Someone asked me today when we talked about stakeholders, is your family considered to be a stakeholder? And the answer is absolutely. So let's make sure that we are balancing this work appropriately. Maintain a very professional environment. Follow your bylaws, follow procedures, establish standards for your meetings. You know, keep things as organized as possible. But at the same time, you know, don't be so regimented that it's not fun. Make it to have some fun, okay? Volunteer leadership is something that requires patience. We are going to have some setbacks once in a while. There'll be someone who may not follow through on a commitment for some unfortunate reason. So we have to be ready for that. We've got to have that plan B. We should recognize our teams as frequently as possible without overdoing it. You want to create that sense of loyalty with your team. You want to encourage people to come up with new ideas. And above all, you want to have some fun. So to kind of pull it all together, volunteer leadership, it is a commitment. You have to make a very sincere commitment that you're going to follow through. It isn't always easy, but anything that's worthwhile never really is. You're going to learn a lot. It does require your time. It requires patience. It is definitely rewarding. As you can see, most of you have talked about it. I'm getting some real value out of being a volunteer. It is absolutely necessary if PMI, as a chapter, we're going to survive, and you have to do it through teamwork. Teamwork will sustain it. So these are the kinds of things that we need to focus on in order for our volunteers to step up and our volunteer leaders to stay committed. Last item here, questions, and we're going to open it up for some questions and comment, would be what can you do to encourage collaboration, improve the level of participation within, and increase the perceived value of your chapter? Okay, what can you do to do that? And by the way, if you improve that value, if you improve or enhance the perceived value, there will be people who will step up and say, you know, I'd like to be part of that. And how do we elevate the awareness of the value of project management within our workplace and in other organizations? That's our second mission. We're ambassadors of project management, not just the chapter. What we really want to do is get that word out. So let's keep this good thing going. Make sure you have a succession plan. Identify potential new officers. Make sure you have a backup plan. Find new leaders to step up. Talk to them, encourage them, work with them. You know, be a little bit persistent, but don't be an annoyance. But get people that, you know, you really think that they can help the chapter. You know, spend some time with them. Set an example and be visible and make a difference. Those are the key elements of that. So volunteer leadership, celebrate your successes, have some fun with it, and what we'll do is we'll open this up for some questions or comments. So anybody have a comment? Anybody want to share something? We can open it up to a microphone. So all you have to do is raise your hand, basically, and tell us what you're thinking, or send a comment via your questions. Anybody have a comment? Anybody want to make a statement? We'll hand you the microphone. Okay, let me take a look at questions. Do we have any questions or comments in there? Okay. Okay, so we don't have any other additional comments there. Anybody have something they'd like to offer? Any comments about your experience as a volunteer? Don't be shy. We'll turn on the microphone for you. All right, well then let me ask you this. Did you find the information useful? If you're interested in this slide presentation, I can certainly pass it on to you. All you have to do is send me an email. You can send it to saladispmp@msn.com, or you can send it to preselect@pminyc.org. Okay, anybody have any comments, suggestions, additions that you would like to see in this presentation? Okay, let me just see if was the information useful. Just a few comments in the questions. Did you get something out of it? Hopefully there was some value.
Frank, we have some comments in the question section, especially some comments from Barbara asking, are there any tips on getting additional younger volunteers?
Well, okay, you know, that's an interesting thing, the younger volunteers. We're talking probably about the people somewhere between 20 and 30, I guess. They like to do things. They like to create things that are active, you know, action-oriented kinds of things. Here's an example. I thought this was kind of interesting. I was a speaker at the National Association of Asian American Professionals. They held a conference at the Hilton in New York City. It was about 2 years ago. Most of the people, by the way, were very young. They were all between 25 and 35 years old. And their approach was to not only provide education in terms of things that they need to know for their careers, but they also provided entertainment, things that people found just fun to do that were not necessarily educational. And one thing that they did, which I thought was amazing, is that they actually created a fashion show during the lunch period. They had an extended lunch period, and they had their volunteers display all of these various clothing items, men and women, from various organizations around the city. And they thought that that was the greatest thing, that the music, the excitement of this fashion show kind of thing. So if you're going to attract new members, You have to give them an opportunity to be a little bit creative, let them think a little bit differently. One of the things that will turn off any new young volunteer is for somebody to say, we've done that before, or that's not going to work here, or we don't do that here, or anything like that. Give them the freedom to express some ideas and take a few risks, and I think that you'll find that you'll come up with some amazing, interesting things. Okay, I'm just looking at some of the comments here. My earlier point about the fact that I became involved by simply being asked was true, and shows that if we as chapter leaders simply reach out, tap someone on the shoulder, we will be surprised. And I say absolutely, we need to do much more of that. We need to be out there, be visible, and start asking people to help us out. Someone said, yes, the information was very useful. Any tips on the younger volunteers? Yeah, I think you really have to give them an opportunity to come up with new suggestions, and be careful about how you respond to those maybe unusual suggestions. You know, basically welcome all suggestions with open arms. Okay, great presentation, very useful, good stuff. What's this? The graying of project management of PMI? Okay, you know what? There's a little bit of that. Okay, and you know, I've been around a long time. I don't want to be classified as getting too gray though, because I really have fun with it. It's really something I enjoy doing. Can you give a real-life example of problems retaining volunteers? Well, right off the bat, a couple of real-life situations would be a volunteer steps up and, well, I'll tell you what, here's real life. I don't want to mention the chapter, but a PMI chapter that I'm very familiar with, there had a president-elect and president both resign at exactly the same time. Just like that. They just said, yep, you know, we're not going to be here anymore, we just leave. And that was it. And they started to look into, well, what happened? Well, one person, their job assignment as president became so demanding that they just said they had to let go. And the president-elect, who was being brought in by this president, said, well, if you're not going to be here, I'm not going to be here, and then they both left. Okay? So that's a real-life example of people leaving. Another example of retaining volunteers is that if you do not give people some credit, some acknowledgement, and a sincere thank you for the work they do, they are going to leave and you're not going to retain them. And not only that, that they're going to tell other people about their unpleasant experience. So what you have to do here is you have to be sensitive to the volunteers. They are doing work out of their own time, and they need a feeling of appreciation. You don't give them appreciation, they're not going to stick around. That's just, it's simple as that. Okay, thank you. Got some great ideas at the chapter election process. Great. How do you go about firing volunteers when they are not fulfilling their role properly without losing them completely? Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to, have to make this fairly straightforward and simple. If a person is not performing, you have to provide feedback as to where they are not performing. So it's sort of like a gradual step-by-step process. If you did not establish your expectations up front, then there is very little basis to work with. So number one, establish those expectations up front. If they seem to be faltering, your job as the leader or the person that may have brought them in or your leadership group is to start to ask questions. How can we assist you? What is it that you need? What additional support is required? And we have to go through kind of this gradual process. In many cases, volunteers will promise to try harder, and then they don't. Okay, then we have to step in again, and we have to start talking about the consequences of them not following through on their commitment, how they're also creating problems for the chapter and for other volunteers. We have to make sure people understand that you made a commitment. We're relying on you. If they can't do it, if they simply can't do it, this is where your backup plan and your contingency plans come in. Who is going to step in? You can't just simply let a person go without having a backfill. So make sure that you really think about who's going to fill that position. It's a delicate process, and you want to do it in a very respectful way, because what we just want them to understand is, hey, you said you were going to commit. I understand you have problems. How about if you just do this, and we'll find someone else to do this other job? So kind of let them off a little bit, but don't necessarily let them go 100%. A lot of times it's just that they just have so much on their plate they can't do it. There are times, though, when people are not actually competent to do the job, and that's a different story, and that's going to take different action, and that's going to require, a fair amount of, time investment on your part to make sure that they understand what that situation is. Okay. Let's see, what we have here is, how do you tap them to start with younger project manager professionals? Our dinner meetings, education events, and social events are attended by the old guard. Yeah. Find out ways to get the younger folks involved. If you're going to continue to do business as usual, if you're going to do the same old things year after year after year in the same types of programs, you're not necessarily going to attract new people. The younger generation, if you look at Generation X and Y and the millennials, they communicate differently. You're going to have to start engaging them in the technology of the day. You're going to have to start to change how you give presentations. That the standard PowerPoint slides, they don't really work so much anymore with the young people. They're looking for action. They're looking for hands-on. They're looking for visible, video kinds of things that are not only educational but entertaining. In other words, we have to do what we call infotainment or edutainment. That's really part of that. Can you please repeat the email? Okay, the email would be my last name, Saladis, followed by the letters pmp@msn.com, saladispmp@msn.com, or you can go to preselect@pminyc.org, and I will send you the presentation. Okay. Don't forget to approach those studying for the PMP exam. My 60-year-old brother on the West Coast is finding most job openings require a PMP, so he's looking into certification. Yeah, a lot of chapters will set up a PMP review class. That does a couple of things. Number one is it helps the chapter out financially. It provides some advertising for the chapter. It brings people in to learn some new things, learn some skills, help them get ready for the exam. It's a big deal. So look into things like that. So what we have to do is we have to start to be more creative. The PMI chapter leaders guides tell us a lot of things, and I'm telling you, I'm amazed because I have been around PMI a long time, and I was reading through these documents, and I said, wow, we should definitely be doing these. Okay. Strategic planning, succession planning, coaching and mentoring, facilitating, learning to be better listeners. I mean, if you think about it, if we actually provide those kinds of programs to our leaders, other people are going to say, well, I'd like to get involved in that because I'd like to learn more about those skills too. So it's attitude. It's your own personal brand of leadership. You have to step up to it. You have to have some enthusiasm. You have to make it have fun. You got to have some fun. People that know me from the New York City chapter and other organizations, we got to have some fun somewhere. Go out there and enjoy themselves a little bit. After the chapter meeting where you go out, maybe you network at a bar for a little while. Hey, that's a good idea. Share information whenever possible. The New York City chapter Saturday did a wine tour in the Long Island, right? That's a great way to socialize and network, have some fun during the day. And by the way, Saturday's weather was great, so I'm sure that was a great event. But another thing that the New York City chapter did I thought was really great, they have these social events. They have like these spring into spring or something like that, where they have these rooftop restaurant sessions where you meet and socialize and maybe have a few adult refreshments and just talk about things in general. So have some fun. I think that 2 years ago they had a softball league. Okay, so do some things that are going to be other than traditional project management. Use your imagination. We need to be a little bit more creative, and I think that will all definitely help. Karen says lots of good information and guidelines. Thank you, Karen. Karen, by the way, is a past president of the New York City chapter, very dedicated to the chapter, has helped quite a bit, always volunteering for something, and we definitely appreciate Karen's continued support. So hopefully you enjoyed the presentation. If you do want the slide deck itself, send me an email. And just a last reminder here, International Project Management Day coming up on November 6th. If you're not doing something for it, think about doing something for International Project Management Day. Even if it's a simple coffee break or some cards sent to your project managers thanking them for the job that they do. I'm a firm believer that project management is the unappreciated profession. So let's get out there and show people that we appreciate the work that they do, their teams along with them. Do something. It doesn't have to be big, but do something to recognize people on International Project Management Day, 6 November 2014. And if you have any other questions, certainly send me an email. I'll be happy to answer your questions. And if you have any other advice that you would like to share when it comes to dealing with volunteers, please feel free to just get involved. Share your information. Tell us what's on your mind. I'm sure we can use it. One thing that Karen is sharing is don't be afraid to step up to these positions. I guarantee you that if you have the right attitude, it will be an extremely rewarding experience. So thank you very much for spending part of your Monday evening on a webinar talking about PMI, but hopefully you get some value out of it. And thank you, Kay Weiss, who is out there in La Crosse, Wisconsin, who volunteered to record this, and she's one of my partners, and we work together on a lot of things, and I appreciate all that Kay does, and she's also a very, very strong PMI supporter. So thank you very much, and we'll be setting up some other webinars in the future, and of course any comments that you might have, just send